The galaxy had always whispered about humans, but in the far reaches of space, those whispers were often dismissed as myths. Many species believed humans were nothing more than stories told to frighten children or inspire soldiers. They are too small, too fragile, too unpredictable, one scholar species often said. If humans exist at all, they could never survive beyond a single star system. In a quiet corner of the universe, far from the bright stars of the core empires, research vessels picked up strange signals. At first, the signals were ignored. Pulses of energy traveling through hyperspace were common, and most were harmless anomalies. But these signals were different. They carried patterns that were too complex, too intentional, to be random. For years, alien scientists debated their origin, trying to decode them, trying to understand what they meant. Could it be humans? One researcher asked, cautiously during a routine briefing. The room fell silent. The very idea was almost laughable. Humans were supposed to be legends, creatures from an old era of myth. No one had actually seen one, and yet the signals moved through space like a carefully arranged message. Almost like a warning dot, it took months for the first scout fleet to venture into the sector where the signals originated. Their ships were designed to detect anomalies, to explore the unknown. They had seen strange things before, black holes forming, stars collapsing, but nothing like this. When they entered the dark region of space, filled with nebulae and drifting asteroids, they detected something enormous moving in the distance. At first, they thought it was a natural formation, a cluster of rocks or a gas storm. But as they got closer, the outline of something far more deliberate became clear. A fleet unlike anything they had imagined was moving silently through the void. Ships of varying sizes and shapes, perfectly coordinated, cut through space with precision. They emitted a strange energy field that no known technology could produce. And yet, there was something familiar about it, something almost human. The first official report described it as a living formation moving as one mind, one purpose. The scientists were stunned. None of the ancient records, none of the data from older civilizations had ever described anything like this. If humans were real, they were not just survivors. They were masters of war, masters of space, masters of strategy in ways that no other species had even imagined. Word of the sighting spread slowly at first. It started with whispers in academic halls and research stations. Soon, the news reached the command centers of major interstellar empires. Fleet admirals argued over what to do. Some called for immediate engagement, thinking that humans must be challenged before they became a threat. Others urged caution, insisting that no civilization should confront something they barely understood. The myth of humans had always included stories of resilience and courage. Old legends told of humans surviving impossible odds, thriving on planets where life should not exist, inventing tools and strategies to overcome every challenge. But those stories had been considered allegories. Now, the reality of the fleet proved that the myths were not only true, they had been an understatement dot as the scout ships observed from a distance. They saw humans performing maneuvers that defied conventional understanding. Entire sections of the fleet changed direction almost instantaneously, avoiding obstacles that no algorithm could predict. Smaller ships moved in intricate patterns around larger vessels, forming temporary shields and offensive formations that seemed almost organic. The alien crews could not determine whether it was pre-programmed or instinctual. It was as if the fleet itself had a mind. Inside the command chambers of the observing aliens, debates raged. Some argued that the humans must be controlled or destroyed before their influence spread. Others suggested attempting communication, though no one had yet deciphered the signals fully. All agreed on one point: the humans were unlike anything they had faced before. Meanwhile, the humans continued their silent passage through the void, unaware of the panic they were causing. To them, This was routine. They were explorers, warriors, and travelers of the stars, moving with a purpose that was clear to them, even if it was mysterious to the galaxy at large. Each maneuver, each calculation, each adjustment of their formation was deliberate, yet almost effortless. The observers noted that humans seemed to operate on instinct as much as on logic, blending creativity with precision in ways that no AI, no alien fleet could replicate. The scouts recorded everything they could, sending back detailed reports to their home systems. When the reports were analyzed, commanders began to realize that the humans were capable of more than just survival. They were capable of changing the balance of power across entire sectors. The fleet's presence alone had an effect. Systems that had been stable for centuries suddenly felt vulnerable. Trade routes were disrupted not by attacks, but by the mere passage of the human fleet. Planets once considered safe bases were reconsidered as potential strategic points. Fear began to mix with curiosity. Scholars, who had long dismissed humans as fictional, were now scrambling to understand what made them so different. Why could humans coordinate such vast numbers of ships without error? Why did their energy fields operate in ways that defied physics as understood by other species? And most importantly, why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? Some began to see the humans not only as warriors, but as teachers. There was something almost inspiring about their presence, something that reminded other species of the power of ingenuity, courage, and determination. In hushed tones, researchers began to speculate that perhaps humans were a test, a challenge from the universe to show what true resilience and creativity looked like. Even the veteran fleet admirals, hardened by decades of interstellar warfare, could not help but feel awe. They watched as human ships navigated asteroid fields, cosmic storms, and gravitational anomalies with fluid grace. Where other species relied on rigid calculations and predictable formations, humans adapted. They improvised. They thrived, and yet humans did not broadcast messages of conquest or war. They did not boast or demand tribute. They moved with purpose, silent and deliberate, as if they were carrying the weight of their entire species with quiet confidence. This was not arrogance. It was mastery. And for those who observed, it was both terrifying and mesmerizing. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers of human myths turned into undeniable reports. Systems that had ignored the tailies began to prepare for contact. Fleets were mobilized, defenses reinforced, alliances reconsidered. The galaxy was waking up to the fact that humans were no longer just stories. They were real. And they were coming. In those early days, before the first true engagement, humans remained a mystery. Their motives were unclear, their strength unimaginable. Yet one truth became evident to every species watching from the void. Humans were not to be underestimated. The legends had underestimated them. The myths had underplayed them. And now, in the dark expanse of space, the universe was beginning to understand that humans had arrived, and their presence would echo across the stars for generations to come. The signal pulses continued, subtle but insistent, like a heartbeat in the void. They spoke of a species that refused to be bound by expectation, that turned every challenge into an opportunity, that survived and thrived where others would falter. Every observer felt it a sense that history was being rewritten, not by diplomacy, not by politics, but by something far simpler and more powerful, human will. And so, in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where myths had lived for centuries, humans were no longer a story. They were reality. And the void itself seemed to pause, waiting to see what these legendary beings would do next. The first time the alien scouts actually saw the human fleet up close, it was unlike anything they had ever imagined. From a distance, the ships had looked massive, yet when they approached, the sheer scale and number of them became overwhelming. Thousands of vessels of all sizes stretched across the void, like a moving city of stars. Every ship seemed designed for a purpose, yet all of them moved together as if guided by one mind. The aliens had studied countless war fleets, but humans did not fight like anyone else. Other species relied on strict formations and predictable patterns, but the humans were different. Their ships did not simply follow orders, they adapted, reacted, and even seemed to anticipate the movements of their enemies. It was as if every human vessel could read the battlefield in real time and adjust instinctively. The first contact was accidental. A small alien scouting ship drifted too close to the fleet, and for a moment there was complete silence. Sensors could barely process the scale of the technology. Then, without warning, human ships maneuvered around it, not aggressively, but with precise care, keeping the scout alive while simultaneously demonstrating control. It was a subtle message, one the aliens would remember for a long time. Humans were powerful, but not reckless. The alien fleet commanders had never felt anything like it. Their centuries of experience in space warfare told them to expect confrontation, chaos, or at least a challenge, yet the humans presented neither arrogance nor malice. Instead, there was a quiet confidence, a sense that humans did not need to prove themselves. They simply acted. Every move was deliberate, calculated, and yet alive. Like a conversation happening across light years in the silence of space, it became clear that the humans' technology was unlike anything in known history. Weapons that fired at impossible speeds, shields that bent energy in unexpected ways, engines that could twist and turn faster than physics should allow. It was overwhelming. The alien scientists scrambled to understand the mechanics, but even with their most advanced tools, they could not fully explain what they were seeing. What was perhaps most terrifying was not their firepower, but their coordination. Human ships moved like a single organism, responding instantly to threats, adjusting formations, and anticipating the moves of others. Even when attacked, their reaction was fluid, almost artistic. Entire fleets of aliens found themselves outmaneuvered without ever engaging in direct battle. It was disorienting to watch, and many began to doubt the wisdom of confronting humans at all. Some aliens argued that humans must have some hidden weakness, a vulnerability that had simply not been discovered yet. They searched for patterns, mistakes, anything that could be exploited. But no matter how closely they examined the human fleet, every maneuver seemed intentional, precise, and flawless. It became clear that humans were not only strong, they were clever. They used strategy, improvisation, and creativity in ways the aliens could not predict. Communication attempts were another challenge entirely. Humans did not respond to standard transmissions, and their signals were encrypted in ways that made sense only to them. When aliens tried to send greetings, warnings, or commands, there was no reply. Yet through movement and presence, humans communicated enough to make their intentions clear. They were here, they were powerful, and they were not to be underestimated. The alien crews were fascinated and terrified at the same time. Some watched in awe as humans performed maneuvers that seemed impossible. Smaller ships darting through asteroid fields to protect larger vessels. Sudden changes in speed and direction that avoided potential collisions, and formations that seemed to adapt like living organisms. It was unlike anything their historical archives had described. The humans themselves seemed almost indifferent to the attention. They carried on as if the observers did not exist, focused on a purpose that no one could fully understand. And yet, their presence had a profound effect. Entire star systems that had once felt secure began to feel vulnerable. Trade routes were disrupted, and colonies reconsidered their security measures. Simply by being there, humans forced other civilizations to reevaluate their strength and strategies. Some alien leaders began to panic, calling for immediate action. They feared that waiting would only give humans an advantage. Others urged patience, arguing that aggression could provoke a conflict they could not survive. Within the councils, debates grew heated. The presence of humans had sparked fear, admiration, and even hope, all at once. As the humans moved deeper into space, the alien fleets began to realize something unexpected. Humans did not seek destruction for the sake of it. They were careful, calculating, and precise. Systems that might have been destroyed by other civilizations were left intact. There was a sense of fairness, of purpose, in everything humans did. This was not mindless conquest. It was control with intention. Over time, the alien fleets began to notice patterns, not in the humans themselves, but in the effects they had on the universe. Planets and colonies that had once been isolated found themselves more connected. Trade routes shifted, alliances formed, and strategies evolved in response to the human presence. It was as if humans were not just moving through space, they were reshaping it, leaving their mark in ways that went beyond technology or weaponry. Observers began to speculate on why humans behaved this way. Some believed that humans were testing the galaxy, measuring strength and resilience. Others thought they were explorers at heart, moving through space to understand, to learn, and to prepare for challenges that others could not yet see. Whatever the reason, it was clear that humans did not conform to expectations. They did not follow the rules of other species, and they did not act out of fear. Stories about human capability spread quickly among alien civilizations. Early reports that once described them as mythical began to include vivid accounts of their fleet, their tactics, and their unexplainable adaptability. For many, it was a wake-up call. Myths had become reality, and the reality was astonishing. The humans' presence had already begun to change the way civilizations thought about war, strategy, and survival. Even among the alien fleets, admiration began to grow alongside fear. Humans were dangerous, yes, but they were also inspiring. They operated with ingenuity, courage, and a kind of creativity that other species had long abandoned. Watching humans in action was like watching a masterful performance, a display of intelligence, discipline, and instinct combined. By the time the first serious encounter occurred, the galaxy had already started to shift. Fleets moved cautiously, unsure whether to engage or retreat. Communications were limited, strategies were reconsidered, and alliances that had lasted centuries were questioned. The humans had arrived, and their presence alone forced every species to adapt. When the first clash began, it was almost anticlimactic. The humans did not seek chaos, but when provoked, they responded with precision. Alien ships that had relied on predictable formations found themselves outmaneuvered. Weapons that had been feared for generations were rendered ineffective by the humans' clever tactics. Entire battles were won without excessive destruction, as if the humans preferred efficiency over spectacle. And yet, even in combat, the humans remained human. Their actions were deliberate, yes, but also unpredictable in the way only humans could be. They made mistakes, but mistakes that became advantages. They improvised in ways that confounded even the most experienced alien commanders. Every engagement taught a lesson. Humans could not be measured by conventional standards. The result was a mixture of awe and fear. Alien fleets began to report the humans not only as a threat, but as a phenomenon. They were witnessing something. Beyond technology, beyond strategy, they were witnessing the human spirit in action. Each maneuver, each decision, each calculated risk spoke of determination, resilience, and adaptability. By the end of the encounter, the aliens knew one thing. For certain, humans were real, they were powerful, and the galaxy would never be the same. Myths had become reality, and reality had surpassed imagination. The humans did not boast, they did not announce themselves, they simply existed, and their existence echoed through the void in ways that could not be ignored. Even after the humans had moved on, the alien fleets remained on high alert. Reports, data, and first-hand accounts filled the communication networks. Scholars, commanders, and politicians debated endlessly. How could a single species, considered mythical for centuries, possess such capability? How could they command fleets with unmatched precision and adaptability? The questions had no easy answers, and so the galaxy watched. Every civilization knew that humans were not simply another species. They were a force of nature. Observers across star systems studied them, learning what they could, preparing for what might come next. And somewhere in the depths of space, the human fleet continued its silent journey, moving with purpose, leaving echoes of power, ingenuity, and resilience in every system it passed dot in that moment. The universe understood something fundamental. Humans were not just survivors, not just warriors. They were a reminder that intelligence, courage, and will could defy expectations. The legends had underestimated them. The myths had understated them. And now, with every passing light year, humans were proving to the galaxy that reality could be far more extraordinary than anyone had ever imagined. The humans had already left a mark on the galaxy, even before a single full-scale battle began. Stories of their fleet, its size, precision, and unexpected maneuvers traveled faster than any alien message could. Entire civilizations that had dismissed them as myths now watched with a mix of fear and fascination. No one could deny it any more. Humans were real, and they were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The first encounters had shown one undeniable truth. Humans were not predictable. Their tactics were unusual, even baffling to every other species. Alien fleets relied on formulas, simulations, and centuries of combat doctrine. They planned every movement, every attack, every response in advance. Humans did not. Humans moved, as if guided by intuition, creativity, and instinct combined in ways the galaxy had never considered. One observer described it as watching a storm form in space. At first, it seemed random, chaotic even, but as the humans moved, patterns emerged, patterns that were beautiful, precise, and deadly. Small fleets darted between larger ships, creating shields and barriers where none should have been. Bombardments were calculated not just to hit targets, but to influence enemy movements, forcing them to act in predictable ways. It was strategy, yes, but it was also art. Alien commanders were forced to rethink everything they knew about warfare. Systems that had been considered secure suddenly felt exposed. Trade routes were disrupted, communication lines threatened, and colonies that had thought themselves safe now prepared for an unknown force. Every action the humans took reshaped the balance of power without them ever seeming to try. Their presence alone was influence. Some alien scientists began to theorize about what made humans so different. They speculated that humans were not just strong physically or technologically, but mentally. They seemed capable of creativity and adaptability that no other species could match. Even when faced with impossible odds, they improvised. They adjusted their tactics, reacted to danger instantly, and often turned what appeared to be mistakes into advantages. Observers could only watch in awe. The humans did not issue threats or declare their intentions. They simply moved, explored, and when necessary, defended themselves. Yet their actions carried meaning. Entire alien fleets learned quickly that underestimating humans was a mistake. Those who did often found themselves outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and sometimes even defeated without realizing it. Human strategy was as much psychological as it was physical. They forced their opponents to doubt themselves, to question their methods, and in doing so, often controlled the battle without firing a shot. It was in these moments that some alien scholars began to notice something extraordinary. Humans had a way of inspiring even their enemies. Witnessing the precision, courage, and adaptability of humans, sparked a strange mix of fear and admiration. Even those who would oppose them in battle felt compelled to study them, to understand them, to learn from them. Humans became a standard against which civilizations measured their own capability, ingenuity, and courage. The first real test came when a coalition of alien fleets attempted to challenge a human formation near a dense asteroid field. The coalition believed that by surrounding the humans, they could force them into a trap. They had calculated every possible move, every reaction, every escape route. They had simulations, strategies, and centuries of combined experience. But the humans did not behave according to prediction. Small ships wove through the asteroid field like dancers, moving around larger vessels to create layers of protection. They adapted to changing conditions instantly, avoiding collisions, anticipating the coalition's movements, and creating opportunities to strike where no one had thought to look. Every maneuver seemed deliberate, and yet it was unpredictable. Alien fleets struggled to respond. Weapons that should have been devastating were rendered useless by the human shields and evasive maneuvers. Calculated attacks missed by tiny fractions of a second, enough to give humans the advantage. And while the humans remained quiet and composed, the alien commanders found themselves second-guessing every decision, wondering if they had ever truly understood warfare at all, that it wasn't brute force that made humans. Terrifying, it was adaptability. When one strategy failed, humans adjusted instantly. When their enemy expected them to retreat, they pressed forward. When their opponent sought to predict their movement, they changed it. And when a situation seemed hopeless, humans found solutions that no one else could have imagined. Some alien scholars began to notice patterns, but not patterns in attack. They noticed patterns in thought. Humans seemed capable of turning even chaos into order, unpredictability into advantage. Every engagement, every maneuver, every response was a lesson in resourcefulness and courage. For the first time, the galaxy saw that intelligence and willpower could be as powerful as fleets of ships or devastating weapons. As news of the human spread, entire star systems began to shift their perspective. The humans' presence alone forced civilizations to rethink strategies, to train more rigorously, and to innovate faster than ever before. Political alliances that had lasted centuries began to fracture, as leaders debated whether to fight, flee, or learn from the humans. Fear and respect coexisted in equal measure. Even within the human fleet, there was no arrogance. Despite their overwhelming capability, they moved with purpose and discipline. There were no unnecessary attacks, no displays of power for ego's sake. Every decision was deliberate, and every action had meaning. This combination of strength, creativity, and restraint made humans even more extraordinary. They were powerful, but they were also measured, patient, and precise. During the encounters, some alien species attempted to communicate, to offer peace, to negotiate. Humans did not ignore them, but they did not speak in the language of threats or promises either. They responded through action, through presence, and through the careful demonstration of capability. Their silence was not arrogance, it was a statement. They existed on their own terms, and they were capable of holding the galaxy's attention without declaring it aloud. The psychological effect of humans was profound. Alien fleets reported unease, hesitation, and even awe in the face of human capability. Training protocols had to be rewritten. Commanders reconsidered tactics. Scholars questioned centuries of assumed knowledge. The humans had achieved something remarkable. They had reshaped perception itself. Even after leaving the immediate area, the humans' influence lingered. Colonies that had once considered themselves isolated reconsidered their defenses. Trade routes were rerouted. Fleets were expanded, studied, and adapted. The humans had left a mark not through destruction, but through their presence, their strategy, and their example. They had turned myth into reality, and reality into inspiration. Throughout these events, one fact became clear to every species that observed them. Humans did not fight like anyone else, but they also did not dominate for domination's sake. Their power was paired with a sense of purpose, a clarity that made them both unpredictable and understandable at the same time. They were not conquerors. They were masters of adaptation, resilience, and ingenuity. And for the first time in the galaxy, the idea that humans were merely a myth was completely shattered. No longer were they stories to frighten children or inspire hope. They were real, present, and transformative. Their fleet, their tactics, their very way of existing challenged every assumption, every plan, and every expectation the galaxy had held for centuries. As humans moved further into unexplored space, alien civilizations realized that a new era had begun. Myths had become reality. Legends had walked among them, and their echo would continue to shape the galaxy for generations. And even as alien fleets prepared for future encounters, they knew one undeniable truth. Humans were not just strong. Humans were intelligent, adaptable, unpredictable, and unyielding. They were a force that could not be ignored, and the galaxy had no choice but to recognize them. The presence of humans had created ripples that would be felt long after they had passed. Fleets would train differently. Colonies would plan differently. Governments would act differently. All because one species, once thought to be mythical, had arrived and proven that intelligence, willpower, and courage could redefine the universe itself. In the void, the human fleet moved silently, aware of the attention, but focused on its own purpose. They did not boast. They did not threaten. They simply existed, demonstrating what humanity could do when courage and ingenuity combined. And as they traveled through the stars, they left behind more than fear. They left behind hope, inspiration, and a challenge to every species watching. The universe could be changed if one had the vision, the courage, and the will to do it. By the end of these encounters, the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were no longer myths. They were real. They were extraordinary. And they had arrived not just to survive, but to show that intelligence, adaptability, and courage could echo through the stars, louder than any fleet, louder than any weapon, louder than any civilization. The humans' arrival had already caused ripples across the galaxy, but by the time their fleet moved deeper into contested space, those ripples had turned into waves. Entire coalitions of alien civilizations found themselves at a crossroads. Some argued that they must unite to resist the humans, while others wondered if resisting was even possible. Myths that had been dismissed for centuries were now undeniable reality, and fear spread faster than any signal could travel. The first attempts to form resistance against the humans were chaotic. Alien fleets, each with their own command styles and strategies, tried to coordinate, but their methods often clashed. Some insisted on rigid formations and overwhelming numbers, believing brute force could overpower the humans. Others suggested ambushes and subterfuge, thinking clever tactics could work where numbers failed. Disagreements escalated, and soon, alliances that had lasted centuries were beginning to fracture under the pressure. The humans, meanwhile, did not seek confrontation for the sake of power. They moved with purpose, their fleet acting as one organism, yet each vessel capable of independent action. When alien fleets attempted to engage them, humans responded with precision, not chaos. Attacks that should have caused panic were handled calmly and efficiently. Humans seemed to understand the intentions of their opponents before they even acted, anticipating moves and countering them with skill and patience. This unpredictability frustrated alien commanders. They were accustomed to opponents following logic and patterns. Humans did not. Sometimes they appeared to retreat, only to strike in a way that forced entire fleets into disarray. Sometimes they held their ground against overwhelming odds, refusing to yield even when the situation seemed hopeless. Each encounter left the aliens puzzled, admiring, and wary. All at once. In some systems, alien populations began to panic. Colonies that had never experienced conflict now strengthened defenses and stockpiled resources. Entire governments debated evacuation plans. The humans had not attacked indiscriminately, yet their presence alone forced civilizations to change their priorities. It was a power that was subtle, but more effective than any weapon, a power that came from the humans themselves, not their ships. Some aliens tried to understand the humans through observation. They studied fleet patterns, examined energy signatures, and even attempted to predict behavior. But the humans remained unpredictable. Observers noted that humans combined strategy with instinct, planning with improvisation. Even when their intentions were unclear, their actions always had purpose. Humans seemed to thrive in complexity, adapting to challenges and turning obstacles into advantages. Alien fleets that attempted to isolate human ships quickly learned how dangerous it could be. Humans moved as if the void itself was an ally. Asteroid fields became shields, nebulae became cover, and gravitational anomalies were used as tools. When one approach failed, another was immediately tested without hesitation or confusion. Every failure became a lesson, every movement a calculated choice. This combination of ingenuity, courage, and adaptability made humans nearly impossible to predict. Alien commanders began to respect them in ways they had never respected any other species. Even when faced with defeat, the humans did not panic. Their calmness under pressure inspired both fear and admiration. Observers began to realize that humans were not just powerful, they were extraordinary in the truest sense. The humans' approach to conflict was not limited to ships and weapons. They seemed to understand that war was as much about the mind as it was about firepower. Psychological strategy became evident in the way they maneuvered, anticipated enemy actions, and controlled space. Entire fleets found themselves hesitant, second-guessing themselves because humans forced uncertainty without needing to fight directly. It was a level of strategy that few civilizations had ever seen. As humans continued to move through the galaxy, alien leaders faced a dilemma: resist and risk destruction, or observe and attempt to learn from them. Some took the path of resistance, hoping sheer numbers and firepower could make a difference. Others chose to study, to adapt, and to prepare for a future in which humans would be a permanent factor. Either choice carried risk, and neither promised safety. In some regions, those who attempted resistance quickly realized the cost. Human fleet actions were calculated with such precision that entire fleets were neutralized without unnecessary destruction. Ships that had once been considered invincible were rendered ineffective by humans' ability to anticipate moves and exploit weaknesses. Battles were not chaotic. They were controlled. Humans used only what was necessary, demonstrating efficiency, restraint, and intelligence. This approach created a strange dynamic in the galaxy. Fear of humans was widespread, but so was admiration. Even those who opposed them could not help but notice the skill, creativity, and discipline of the human fleet. It became clear that humans were not driven by conquest alone, but by purpose. They did not destroy systems for glory. They acted with intention, every move deliberate and meaningful. The ripple effects of human presence were not limited to military strategy. Entire civilizations began to rethink their approach to governance, trade, and diplomacy. Leaders who had once relied on intimidation now realized that intelligence and ingenuity were equally powerful tools. Scholars studied human behavior, trying to understand their decision-making and adaptability. The humans had become both a threat and a model, challenging the galaxy to grow. Within the human fleet, the focus remained constant. There was no arrogance. No desire for unnecessary conflict. Every maneuver, every deployment, every action was executed with purpose. Smaller ships protected larger ones, supply lines were maintained efficiently, and communication between vessels was seamless. Human coordination was unmatched, blending instinct and strategy in a way that other species could only admire. Some alien observers began to notice another trait: humans were not infallible. They made mistakes, but even mistakes were opportunities. A miscalculation became a new strategy. A setback turned into a lesson. Their adaptability extended beyond planned maneuvers. It was a fundamental way of thinking, an ability to turn challenges into advantage that few species could replicate. Alien scientists began to take notes, hoping to uncover the secret of human resilience. They observed how humans responded under pressure, how they maintained coordination under stress, and how they adapted to the unexpected. The more they studied, the more they realized that humans were not only skilled warriors, they were innovators, problem solvers, and thinkers who could thrive where others would fail. The humans' approach to space itself was revolutionary. They moved through areas previously considered too dangerous, using natural hazards to their advantage. Asteroids, radiation fields, and unstable planets became tools, not obstacles. Alien fleets attempting to block or trap them often found their own strategies used against them. The humans did not rely on raw power alone. They relied on understanding, creativity, and intuition. For many civilizations, this was both terrifying and inspiring. They had long believed that power was measured by numbers of ships or weapons, but humans showed a different truth. Intelligence, courage, and adaptability could outweigh sheer strength. Even those who had prepared for war found themselves humbled by the humans' ability to thrive in complexity. As the humans continued their journey, stories spread of encounters where they had faced overwhelming odds and yet prevailed. Entire fleets that had once believed themselves unstoppable found themselves outmaneuvered. Yet humans never destroyed more than necessary, leaving a message. Power was not the same as recklessness, and skill was more valuable than numbers. Alien populations began to change their perspective. Fear was still present, but respect grew. Humans were no longer just invaders. They were a benchmark, a standard by which civilizations measured themselves. Those who had once dismissed human myths now studied them with fascination, learning not only how to survive, but how to improve, how to adapt, how to think differently. Even the political landscape of the galaxy shifted. Coalitions that had once dominated regions began to fracture. Some leaders argued for resistance, others for observation, but all realized that humans were a force beyond conventional understanding. Their presence forced decisions, inspired reflection, and challenged centuries of assumptions. In the midst of this, humans remained focused. They moved with purpose, guided by principles that other species struggled to understand. They did not boast. They did not seek attention. They simply acted with intelligence and courage. Their presence was enough to alter the balance of power, not through fear alone, but through the undeniable demonstration of skill. And by the time the humans moved beyond the immediate region, the galaxy had already been transformed. Civilizations that had once been complacent were now vigilant. Fleets that had been confident were now cautious. And scholars who had dismissed myths were now studying humans in detail. The humans had changed the way the galaxy thought, planned, and acted. And yet, for all their power and influence, humans remained human. They showed resilience, creativity, and adaptability that no technology alone could replicate. They demonstrated that intelligence and will could shape outcomes, that courage could overcome fear, and that even in the vast void of space, a single species could echo through the stars. The ripple effects continued long after they moved on. Systems that had once seemed secure reconsidered defenses. Leaders adjusted policies. Fleets trained differently. Entire civilizations adapted in response to humans, not because they had to, but because humans had shown them that adaptation was the path to survival and progress. The galaxy began to understand a truth that would last for generations. Humans were no longer myths. They were real. They were extraordinary. They had arrived not to conquer indiscriminately, but to demonstrate that skill, courage, and ingenuity could change the universe itself. And the echo of their fleet, of their presence, would continue to influence the stars long after they had passed out by now. The humans had become a force that every civilization in the galaxy had to reckon with. Fear, admiration, and curiosity had spread across star systems like wildfire. Some species had attempted to resist them. Others had chosen to study them. But everyone was beginning to realize that humans were different. They did not move solely to conquer or dominate. They acted with intention, patience, and a strange sense of balance. When humans arrived near certain populated systems, entire governments and fleets waited in tense silence. Some tried to communicate through formal messages, sending warnings or proposing alliances. Humans did not respond immediately in words. They did not demand tribute. They did not issue threats. They simply positioned themselves deliberately, leaving the message clear without speaking. They observed, they assessed, and they acted only when necessary. This method of silent diplomacy puzzled many alien species. In the past, diplomacy had always been loud and forceful. Messages were broadcast, demands were made, and compliance was often secured through intimidation or brute strength. Humans were different. Their silence carried weight. Every movement of their fleet communicated meaning. Every deployment, every adjustment of ships, every calculated pause told alien civilizations more than words ever could. Some civilizations decided to offer gifts or tribute, hoping to avoid conflict. They sent resources, technology, and even ambassadors. The humans accepted only what was necessary, and even then, their actions were measured. They did not take more than they needed, and they did not out of greed. Observers began to understand that humans valued purpose over gain, principle over power. This behavior created an unusual sense of respect among alien leaders. Those who tried aggression quickly learned how dangerous they could be. The humans responded with efficiency rather than chaos. Fleets that had thought themselves untouchable found themselves neutralized or repositioned without excessive destruction. Human strategy was not just in weaponry or tactics, it was in understanding behavior, predicting choices, and shaping outcomes before confrontation even began. Entire systems that had prepared for all-out conflict found themselves humbled. Even in diplomacy, humans were teachers. They demonstrated through action what it meant to balance strength and restraint. They did not need to announce their moral framework. It was visible in every choice they made. Planets that had expected occupation or destruction instead observed careful management, protection of civilians, and measured use of power. The humans showed that might did not need to be cruel, and that power did not need to be abused. Alien scholars were fascinated. Some species had lived for thousands of years, claiming moral superiority. Yet humans displayed ethics in the midst of interstellar conflict that many could not comprehend. They calculated risks, respected life when possible, and avoided unnecessary escalation. This created a strange dilemma for alien civilizations. How could one resist such a force without losing integrity or dignity? While observing humans, many species began to adapt their own practices. Leaders started to reconsider strategies, not only militarily, but politically and socially. Diplomacy was no longer about threats or domination. Scholars and rulers began studying human methods of negotiation and influence, realizing that intelligence, patience, and ethical decision-making could be as powerful as fleets and weapons. Humans were shaping the galaxy without firing a single shot. some civilizations tried to test humans, sending envoys or provocations to see how they would react. In every instance, humans responded in a way that was both cautious and deliberate. They rarely escalated conflict unnecessarily, instead choosing measured action. These decisions baffled aliens. Some expected retaliation or dominance. Instead, humans acted according to principle, demonstrating that morality could coexist with strength. The humans' approach also inspired hope. Worlds that had once feared annihilation now began to see possibilities. Colonies under threat realized that not every advanced species acted only for conquest. The humans' presence suggested that strength could protect rather than exploit. Entire societies began to shift focus, prioritizing innovation, cooperation, and strategic thinking over fear and isolation. Interestingly, some civilizations began to emulate humans without even realizing it. They studied fleet formations, communication, methods, and even decision-making approaches. Where they had once relied on aggression and intimidation, they now explored tactics that combined skill, intuition, and ethics. The humans had shown that a species could wield great power responsibly and achieve influence without destruction. The humans also demonstrated patience on a scale that alien civilizations found unusual. They did not rush decisions or attack at the first opportunity. Their actions were deliberate, sometimes taking weeks or months to resolve situations. This patience was not weakness, it was a form of strategy. They allowed situations to develop, observed behavior, and then acted decisively when the time was right. Alien fleets learned quickly that humans were always aware, always calculating, and always ready. Even in moments of apparent conflict, humans demonstrated restraint. Ships that could have obliterated entire fleets or planetary defenses often focused only on necessary objectives. They prioritized efficiency over destruction, control over chaos. Civilizations that had never experienced this were forced to reconsider the very nature of power. Observing humans became a lesson in balance, in measured judgment, and in understanding the consequences of every choice. The moral dimension of the humans' presence became more apparent as encounters continued. They were not invincible, but they were wise in their decisions. Humans avoided unnecessary harm, protected the vulnerable, and acted to maintain stability when possible. It was a behavior that alien species had rarely encountered on such a large scale. For the first time, civilizations saw that ethical action could coexist with exceptional capability. As the humans moved through contested space, many species began to rely on observation rather than engagement. Fleets were cautious not to provoke them, and some even sought guidance, hoping to understand how to navigate the presence of such an extraordinary species. Humans became a benchmark, a living example of balance between power and principle. The galaxy watched, learned, and adapted. Some species began to communicate indirectly, sharing intelligence, strategies, and resources in ways that aligned with human behavior. These subtle collaborations did not require formal agreements or treaties. They were based on observation and understanding, reflecting the humans' influence even when they were not present. The humans' impact extended far beyond direct interaction, shaping behavior across light years without a word or a command. Over time, it became clear that humans were not simply changing tactics, they were changing culture. Societies once focused solely on survival, conquest, or expansion began to value creativity, collaboration, and careful judgment. Human principles, observed in action rather than preached, created shifts in how civilizations thought, acted, and interacted. Even the most isolated systems began to consider alternative ways of handling conflict. Inspired by what they had witnessed, in some cases, humans intervened subtly to prevent unnecessary conflict. They would position fleets to discourage aggression, supply resources to maintain stability, or demonstrate power in a way that avoided destruction. Alien leaders noticed that the humans were as much guardians as they were warriors. Their influence was not coercive, it was instructive. Their example shaped the galaxy, teaching through action what words could not. Even after moving on from a system, the humans' presence left lasting effects. Fleets, governments, and societies continued to adjust their methods and priorities based on what they had observed. The humans had demonstrated that influence could be exerted without conquest, that power could be used responsibly, and that intelligence and will could create stability rather than chaos. The psychological impact on alien species was profound. Some felt fear, yes, but many felt hope. They realized that advanced civilizations did not have to act solely in self-interest or aggression. The humans' example showed that courage, intelligence, and moral consideration could shape the galaxy, offering inspiration to those who had once only known fear and domination. Even those who had opposed humans in battle found themselves reconsidering their approach. They studied the humans' tactics, their patience, their efficiency, and their ethical decisions. Alien leaders who had once relied solely on power and intimidation began to integrate human-inspired methods into their own governance and strategy. The humans had become a model, a teacher, and a standard, all without claiming authority or demanding obedience. In essence, the humans had transformed the galaxy not by force, but by example. Their presence encouraged reflection, innovation, and adaptation. Civilizations began to think differently about conflict, strategy, and morality. They began to understand that intelligence and will, combined with courage and ethics, could reshape outcomes on scales previously unimaginable. Human silent diplomacy demonstrated that power was not only about conquest or destruction. It could be about observation, guidance, and careful intervention. They showed that influence could be exercised without coercion, that leadership could be demonstrated through action rather than speech, and that morality could coexist with exceptional ability. By the time humans moved on from the immediate region, the galaxy had already changed. Civilizations that had once focused solely on dominance now considered the value of ethics and innovation. Fleets adapted, leaders reconsidered strategy, and scholars studied humans as a benchmark for growth and capability. The humans had become a living lesson, a standard that would influence generations to come. Even long after they passed, the humans' echo continued to guide civilizations. Systems remained vigilant, fleets remained cautious, and societies continued to learn from the principles demonstrated through observation. The galaxy had realized an undeniable truth. Humans were not just powerful, they were extraordinary in thought, action, and morality. And in that realization, species across the stars began to hope. Hope that power could be wielded responsibly. Hope that intelligence could shape outcomes positively. Hope that courage and creativity could overcome fear and uncertainty. Humans had arrived not only to survive, but to teach the galaxy silently and effectively that strength and principle could exist together. By the time the humans had moved beyond the contested sectors, the galaxy was already transformed. Entire civilizations had felt their presence, and the ripples of their actions continued to spread across star systems. They had not conquered, they had not dominated unnecessarily, yet the effect of their fleet was undeniable. Their presence had reshaped alliances, strategies, and even the way species thought about power and responsibility. For many alien civilizations, the humans had become more than a fleet. They had become a symbol of courage, ingenuity, and resilience. Stories that had once been dismissed as myths were now truth, and the truth was far greater than any legend had suggested. The humans had arrived not just to exist among the stars, but to leave an indelible mark on the galaxy itself. Observers, Across star systems spoke in hushed tones about the humans. They told of their fleet moving like a single organism, yet capable of astonishing individual action. They spoke of their strategies, their adaptability, and their uncanny ability to anticipate challenges. And they spoke of something else, something that could not be measured by technology or force alone: the human spirit. Alien fleets studied every encounter. Scholars analyzed every maneuver. Leaders reviewed every decision humans had made. In their interactions, whether in battle or silent observation, the pattern was clear. Humans were exceptional, not just because of their technology or numbers, but because of their will, their courage, and their capacity to combine intelligence with morality. Their actions carried lessons that no textbook could teach. It became apparent that the humans had changed the way the galaxy measured strength. In the past, fleets had been assessed by firepower, planets by resources, and civilizations by size. Now the standard had shifted. Humans demonstrated that intelligence, adaptability, and ethical decision-making were equally powerful. A small fleet, guided by skill, creativity, and courage, could achieve what massive fleets could not. This realization sparked both awe and humility across the stars. The humans' influence also reached beyond warfare. Planets that had prepared for conflict began to reconsider priorities. Governance shifted toward efficiency, cooperation, and forward-thinking strategies. Trade routes were reimagined to encourage stability rather than exploitation. Even diplomacy changed, influenced by the humans' example of silent but powerful communication. Their presence had taught that influence could be exerted not through force alone, but through action, intention, and integrity. Some civilizations attempted to emulate humans. They restructured fleets to be more adaptive, trained officers to think creatively rather than follow rigid protocols, and emphasized decision-making based on observation and understanding rather than fear and aggression. The humans had become the standard to which civilizations now measured themselves. Observing them was no longer simply a task, it was a form of education. And yet, humans did not seek to instruct. They did not enforce their methods or demand allegiance. Their power and influence were subtle, almost paradoxical. They acted with purpose and discipline, but they allowed others to learn from observation rather than command. This made their presence both inspiring and humbling. The galaxy began to understand that true strength could be exercised without tyranny, and that influence could be achieved without domination. The ripple effect of the human's journey extended far beyond the immediate region. Systems that had been considered isolated began to feel connected. Communication, trade, and strategic planning evolved as species adapted to the new reality. Civilizations that had once been focused solely on expansion or defense now considered efficiency, ethics, and innovation as equally vital. The humans had altered the framework of interstellar civilization without needing to engage in widespread conflict. Even for those species that had opposed the humans, respect had grown. Battles had been fought, tactics tested, and strengths measured. Yet every encounter had left lessons behind. Alien fleets realized that aggression alone could not overcome skill, creativity, and adaptability. They realized that humans could operate under stress, make complex decisions, and maintain coordination in ways that were extraordinary. Respect for humans became a natural consequence of understanding their true capabilities. Some fleets attempted to follow humans, to observe their movements, and to learn. It was not pursuit out of fear, but out of curiosity and the desire to grow. Humans moved silently, yet deliberately, through the stars. Every action they took, every decision they made, communicated principles without words. They were teachers in action, leaving lessons embedded in every encounter. Humans also left behind a sense of balance that the galaxy had rarely seen. They demonstrated that strength need not equate to recklessness, that courage could coexist with restraint, and that intelligence could guide action better than mere numbers or brute force. This lesson was subtle, but its effect profound. Entire civilizations began to reconsider priorities, and the galaxy itself began to shift toward a new paradigm of power, one guided by skill, purpose, and ethics. Even centuries-old traditions and doctrines were challenged. Military strategies that had been considered infallible were re-evaluated. Political leaders reconsidered policies that relied solely on fear or intimidation. Scientists and scholars found new inspiration in the humans' approach to problem-solving, organization, and decision-making. The humans' example transcended culture and species. It became universal, a standard that all could aspire to. Humans did not occupy planets unnecessarily. They did not destroy resources or infrastructure. They moved in ways that demonstrated purpose and respect. The civilizations they encountered began to realize that humans were extraordinary not only because of capability, but because of morality. Strength without recklessness, courage without cruelty, intelligence without arrogance. This was the legacy the humans left behind. Over time, myths evolved into recorded history. Stories that had once been considered fantastical were rewritten with evidence and observation. The galaxy no longer doubted the existence of humans, and with each passing decade, their legend grew. Not as conquerors or rulers, but as beings whose influence reshaped civilizations simply through their presence, principles, and choices. The humans' journey through the galaxy left an echo that would last generations. Fleets, governments, and populations adapted. Systems once isolated connected in ways previously unimagined. Alliances shifted, and civilizations began to emphasize strategy, innovation, and ethical decision-making. Even species that had long relied on aggression learned that there was a different path, one that combined courage, intelligence, and morality. Despite all this influence, humans remained enigmatic. They did not claim glory or broadcast their victories. They moved silently, observing, calculating, and acting with purpose. The galaxy learned to respect their judgment, to study their movements, and to anticipate their presence. And yet, humans never sought recognition for the changes they had inspired. Their work was quiet, deliberate, and profound. Civilizations that had once relied on intimidation began to adopt human-inspired strategies. They studied coordination, adaptability, and problem-solving. They learned to anticipate challenges rather than react impulsively. They reconsidered priorities, focusing not only on survival, but on advancement, collaboration, and ethical responsibility. Humans had changed the galaxy not through force, but through example. The humans' final legacy was more than the victories they had achieved or the fleets they had commanded. Their greatest gift was the inspiration they left behind. Civilizations began to believe in possibilities that had seemed impossible. They realized that courage, intelligence, and ethical action could shape outcomes in ways no one had imagined. Humans had become the standard by which civilizations measured themselves, not as rulers, but as catalysts for growth and understanding. Even after moving beyond the galaxy's edge, the humans' presence continued to influence behavior and decisions. Fleets trained differently, colonies organized differently, and governments made decisions with a deeper understanding of the value of balance, intelligence, and foresight. The humans' echo in space became a guiding force, a reminder that strength without principle was incomplete, and that true influence could be achieved through action and example, rather than domination. In the end, the galaxy came to understand something profound. Humans were no longer myths. They were real, extraordinary, and transformative. They had arrived not to conquer indiscriminately, not to destroy recklessly, but to demonstrate that courage, intelligence, and morality could resonate across light years. Their journey proved that a single species, guided by purpose,